am so excited to be here and grateful to Reagan for the nice invitation. His wife, Artis, has worked for the Department of Cultural Resources for over 40 years and does such an outstanding job with our Arts Council, and is one of the reasons that the Arts Council has the reputation it does. So thank you for what you do. And Patrick, you didn't mention that I've run into you in both Wilson and Concord, where you're doing extraordinary work for historic preservation around the state. And we want that to continue. That's one reason that I'm here today. And let me mention too that I'm here today with Carrie Cox, who is, Carrie, where did you go? She disappeared. Oh, she's in the back right now. She is the Marketing and Public Information Director for the Department of Cultural Resources as well. I'm really happy especially to be here today because Rotary is actually special to me. And it's not only because while I was mayor for 14 years in Salisbury, I realized how important it was to inform the leaders, the most important people in the city about what was going on. And I was particularly grateful when we were able to do that about government. But also I was honored to be named a Paul Harris Fellow in 2007, which was a great honor for me and continues to be. I also have a personal connection because my father, while he was still alive, was a former mayor as well, and he also was president of the Salisbury Rotary Club. And he was always very proud of the fact that that was his club and his fellow members. So it's always had a special place in my heart. And I'm honored to be here today with a club that's 100 years old, and the oldest club, I believe, in North Carolina. So congratulations to you for your 100th birthday in August. So I'm here today because 2.5 years ago, the governor, Governor McCrory, appointed me as Secretary of the Department of Cultural Resources. And he made it very clear what I was to do with my job. And that was to use the Department of Cultural Resources for economic development and job creation. Well, there are many things I could do with this department because, as you may know, it consists of two, in addition to the Arts Council, also 2 art museums, including the Art Museum here in Raleigh, the North Carolina Symphony, State Library and resource to all 100 county libraries in North Carolina, State Archives and State Records, Archaeology, Battleship North Carolina, 27 historic sites, 7 history museums, including 3 maritime museums, Historic Preservation Office, and historical publications. So there's a lot that I could do with that department and use it when I look at economic development and job creation. But I don't know of anything more important that I can do than right now work to bring back the historic preservation tax credits. And so I have been since the first of the year on what I call an awareness tour to make sure that the citizens of North Carolina understand what this has done for our state and how important they are and how important it is for the legislature to hear that we need to get them back. I consider this a crisis, frankly. The governor agreed that this was something that needed to be restored in North Carolina. He was concerned that the legislature might not agree to the program that expired at the end of the year because of the cost to the state. So he asked me if I would put together a group with the Department of Commerce to look at a way that what we could do to cost the state less. Let me first of all explain a little bit about what the tax credits are. And you may know, but I find that many people really don't unless they've used them. And these are the facts. The tax credit, as we know them, started in the late 70s as a federal credit. And President Ronald Reagan actually initiated and encouraged the tax credit as we know it today in the early 80s. So it's a very conservative idea, actually, to encourage private investment. The tax credits, our state very wisely in the late 90s decided that it was something really good for North Carolina because we were seeing many of our downtowns empty and retail leave our downtowns because of the invention of the mall, which took retail out of the middle of our downtown and left many of our beautiful buildings empty. So the federal credits came in the late 90s to piggyback on the state credits to piggyback on the federal credits. So the way they work is the owner of the property has to be on the National Register, and a process has to be followed that is spelled out by these federal credits. Our office, the State Historic Preservation Office in my department, helps people through this process. The process has to be followed successfully. The project has to be completed successfully. Then the owner files taxes, and only then is the state credit available. So there is no risk to the state through all of this process. The owner takes the risk, and that's a very important part and a very important thing to know. Tax credits have been used in 90 out of 100 of our counties, and since the state credits came in the late 90s, we have seen $1.67 billion in private investment. So that's sort of the way it works. Well, so when the governor asked if my department and the Department of Commerce would put together a plan, it was studied for 6 months, and we were able to come up with a plan which cost the state less by reducing caps on very large projects. It reduced percentages. It drastically reduced residential, because that is not income, what we call income producing. But it still was necessary. And the reason it's necessary is because our cities and towns in North Carolina that have our historic downtowns, the oldest residential circled the downtown originally. And so that's where your oldest houses are, and a lot of your houses that are in need of assistance to encourage people to live there. If you redo a downtown, if the circle around it of older houses are boarded up and empty, that is not going to help your downtown as much. And the governor continues to say that he really can't sell North Carolina and sell jobs and bring in businesses into downtowns that are deserted or boarded up or empty. It looks like the community doesn't care. And so he wants to see downtowns that are vibrant and alive. So what did we decide to do about this? After we came up with the plan, we started right before Christmas 2 things. Number one is we realized there are a lot of organizations in North Carolina that realize this is so important. So we put a call out right before Christmas to ask people if they would like to come meet at my office and talk about what we could do to try to talk the legislature into this. So I was very surprised the day after Christmas vacation to return and find about 24 people sitting in our conference room. And they actually so we have formed a coalition, and they represent the state associations of architects, bankers, contractors. We have 10 local chambers of commerce. We have downtown developers, economic developers, realtors, city planners, and the list goes on and on. It includes the North Carolina Central Carolina Council of Governments, the North Carolina League of Municipalities, the North Carolina Metropolitan Mayors Coalition, the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, and Preservation North Carolina. And that's how many statewide groups feel that this is critical and urgent. So we have our coalition. We put together a website, historictaxcredits.org, and asked people to sign a petition for the legislators. In addition, I started out right after Christmas on this, what I call awareness tour. And the reason I call it that is because I've realized that most people don't really know what the tax credits are, and they may not really care, and it sounds really sort of boring. But frankly, in their communities, there are wonderful things that have happened. This $1.67 billion of private investment has happened because of these tax credits. And I want people to understand this, and I want them to understand that wonderful things just didn't happen all of a sudden in their communities and in their downtowns, that the tax credits were involved. So Carrie, who is with me today, has put together this tour starting the 1st of January. At this point, we have made 62 stops in 42 different cities or towns. And what we do when we go in is first we celebrate successes, and we ask the mayors, what do you consider your greatest success from tax credits? So we are there celebrating all kinds of wonderful things that have happened to make sure the communities there know that the tax credits were involved. And then we talk about what potential do you have in your community. And I can tell you in every single city and town we have been in, from east to west, throughout North Carolina, large and small, everyone still has buildings that need help. And I learned from my 14 years as mayor of Salisbury and trying to encourage downtown development that the numbers won't work many times in these old buildings. You don't know what kind of expenses you're going to run into. And I continue to hear that the numbers just don't work without the tax credits. And developers continued to say to me, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the tax credits. So where are we with the legislature? Well, first of all, the governor announced this in his State of the State, that he thought it was critical. And I'm proud to say that the House just passed it overwhelmingly. And the Speaker of the House actually had a press conference and was kind enough to include me with over a dozen House members to say the Senate needs to do this. The problem is that the main thing we've run into, that we've heard as a reason that the Senate has not been interested as of yet, is that it's a philosophy. It's a philosophy of tax reform and doing away with all tax credits. I think purists that do tax reform want all tax credits to go away, and the governor feels that this is different. This should be an exception, and that you can't do away with everything that's good about North Carolina for tax reform. He very much, and our department very much, appreciates what the legislature is doing for tax reform, but we don't think that it is necessary for this to end to achieve it. So, and I can tell you also that just last week I was with the governor when he signed a bill that the Senate had just passed for solar power and tax credits. So they are willing to look at tax credits, so I feel very much like we still have hope before this session ends to have this happen. But and the last thing I'd like to share with you, and then I'll take any questions that you might have, but the last thing I want to share with you is something that in my 2.5 years in Raleigh, working with the legislature, I have not heard. And there's one thing that I have not heard from them. Because I have heard tax credits, I've heard tax reform, I've heard budget, I've heard numbers. It's all in the context of numbers. And what I have not heard is, this is the history of the state of North Carolina. These beautiful buildings, the tour I have been on is absolutely, it's been incredible. What I have seen, and the gorgeous architecture, the beautiful buildings, the enthusiasm of people in their towns that they have. Each one's very different. Each city and town is very different, but they have one thing in common. They have citizens and leaders who are so enthusiastic about their own communities, and it's so exciting for me to be there. But there's a very rich history I've seen, and to me, when you put all of these buildings together, they really tell the North Carolina story. They tell the story of our changing economy. And let me tell you just a few of the things I've seen. I knew I would see textiles, the story of textiles manufacturing, furniture, and that I would see that, but I've seen so much more. I've seen a peanut mill in Edenton, a wagon company in Hickory and Wilson, a buggy factory in Sanford, and now the wagon and the buggy companies, of course, went out of business when the automobile came about. So they were known nationwide, and then suddenly, when the automobile came, they were gone. And these beautiful buildings are still there. I've seen the former Gaston Hospital in Gastonia, a post office in Clinton, a courthouse in Shelby, a department store in Greenville, hardware stores in Apex, Salisbury, and Warrenton, hotels in Concord, Statesville, and Fayetteville, a bank in Kinston, theaters in Tarboro and Lenore, beautiful homes right on Main Street in Lewisburg and many other locations, and so much more. And as I said, to me, this tells the story of our history. We've got such a rich history in North Carolina, and I'm finding so much with the thousands of people that we have talked to that North Carolinians value that history, and they want it saved. And so that's the message that I'm trying to convey, that when you live in North Carolina, whether you live, no matter where you are, if you're right here in the Piedmont, you're proud to say, you know, my state has the mountains and we have the coast. And not all states can say that, but we can say that. And we talk about that like they're ours in North Carolina. Well, in my opinion, the buildings in between are just as much North Carolina, and they're just as important as our historic sites in the state. I have worked with, I've seen Patrick at 2 of my events because he is a very successful and very much appreciated developer that will come into these downtowns where they need help. And I've had the mayor say, I'm so thankful for people like this that have the vision to see these old buildings. And some of the things I've seen, you know, mills with trees growing up in the middle of them and things like you would think, how could anybody ever think that they could make something out of this? And incredible things have happened. But I can tell you, and he just told me at lunch, that as much as he loves doing these projects in North Carolina, he's going to have to be looking at other states because of the numbers. That if he can't make the numbers work here, he'll be going to Virginia for his next project. And we can't lose these new visionary people that want to help North Carolina. So the more I travel and the more I see and the more I talk to people around the state, the stronger I feel that we cannot sit back and let this happen. And so what I'm asking you today is just for you to urge any senators you know to please not just agree to speak on, not just agree to vote for this if it comes to a vote, but to speak up and to let the leadership know that this is something that's important, not just in their own district, but really for the entire state. So I just ask you, if you would, do whatever you can to help us save the history of North Carolina. Thank you for having me. I'll be happy to answer any questions that, if you have any, that you might have about this or anything else in our department that I can answer. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the $1.6 billion investment.
Yes.
How much were the tax credits related to that investment?
I don't have the exact number, but there were about 20% at the time. Well, depending on if it's income or non-income producing. And I'm sorry, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me right now. I can tell you that when the governor felt that we should make this, he wanted to see a program that cost the state less. We've gotten it down now to where fiscal research estimates it'll be around, it could cost the state around $8 million in these tax credits. But I can also tell you that we have developers who have told us that that money's paid back in 2 or 3 years by the taxes that, especially for income producing, that it brings back to the state and an annuity after that. But to go back to your question, I think it might have run, and Carrie, I don't know if you remember, but maybe as much as $20 million to the state a year, because we had very large projects in Durham and Winston-Salem. Our program, and that's the legislation that has been introduced and passed the House now, puts caps on those very large projects, and so they'll only pay up to $20 million. It's a $20 million cap. So it is much less, and it also is more predictable because of the caps. There won't be the large spikes in the budget that were part of the criticism. Any other questions?
Hey, Secretary Kluttz, thank you so much for being with us today. And I've always heard that nothing is more important to stimulate our downtown development than the historic tax credit. But I was wondering if you could explain how the federal tax credit, there still is a federal historic tax credit, relates to the state, and
right.
Is the federal much more advantageous, more in the pocket of the developers of the property?
And thank you for asking that, and because I probably should have made that a little bit clearer. We still have the federal credits. The credits, federal and state, when they are implemented, they always have an ending date. They have a sunset date. So our state credits that sunsetted, I guess that's the right word, at the end of the year, were scheduled to do that. Nobody cut them out. They just naturally. But every time that's happened in the past, they've been renewed by a current legislature, and these weren't. But the federal credits are what the state bases its state credits on. So you have to be able to get the federal credits first for the state credits to piggyback on that, which basically in the past doubled the amount of credit you could get back. The state credits continue, and that's why Patrick and I were lobbying in Washington for the federal credits, because they're due to sunset, I believe, next year. Now, we haven't had any talk that they won't be renewed, but we don't want to take any chances. So we were up talking to all the North Carolina delegation for the day to make sure that they were aware of this in plenty of time to make sure they are going to be renewed. So the federal credits we will still have. So you do, if you're doing these buildings, and it could be that Patrick may be able to make numbers work with just federal credits, but it's more difficult. But that's why we need some. When we did the study, we looked at how much we could reduce the state credits that developers would still accept, and we got it as low as we could, where it'll still be enough incentive that they will choose North Carolina. But thank you for that. That's a very good question. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Could you perhaps identify a couple of specific areas which could be poster cases for showing the benefit of these tax
Right.
exemptions. Could you identify just two that could be out there and say, these are winners?
Right.
Great examples.
Probably the largest one is Luray Mill. I was just with the governor when he cut the ribbon on that about a month ago in Gastonia. When it was built, it was the largest textile mill, I believe, in the world, under roof in the world. And it was such an incredible, really eyesore for Gastonia. And I've seen that everywhere, that these, especially these huge textile mills, when they leave, not only are these cities devastated because a lot of times they're their largest water customer, which is what happened to us in Salisbury, but you are left with this monstrosity of a building. And I think that's probably, I would say, the largest example of something that looked impossible. And it is just incredible to see what it is now. Offhand, I would say the work that Patrick has done in Wilson, taking that was the wagon company, and made condominiums and retail and apartments as well. But I have hundreds and hundreds of, you would be amazed how many examples there are around the state of different things and modern uses. When you go through the process to have something rehabilitated through our office, it doesn't make you go back and use it, for a 100-year-old type of a business. I mean, we are able to modernize what we do. And actually, Patrick may help me answer some questions from a developer's point of view, and that might be helpful for you to hear too a little bit, if we've got enough time, from him about his view about it. But I'd love to.
Do you have before and after photos of some of those big successful projects like the Gastonia?
Yes.
I'd love to see photos of it.
Okay, great, wonderful.
Do you have it? Is it on the department website or something?
We have them. We do have them. Are they on the website, Carrie? Carrie's in charge of our website. I'm sorry.
You can send them to Reagan to share.
We can do that.
Yeah, we could. We'd be happy. We'd be happy. We've got beautiful, and as I said, it really is amazing. I was talked into a building, and another reason I'm a believer is I was talked into a building when just federal credits were in effect in the early 80s in downtown Salisbury, when downtown Salisbury was a ghost town. And I was only talked into this by friends named Margaret and George Kluttz, who talked my husband and me into it because the name of the building was the historic Kluttz building. And when your name is Kluttz, you will understand there's nowhere but Salisbury and Rowan County where you find that is not an unusual name, and to find a historic Kluttz building, we could not say no. But I will tell you, it was horrible. The windows, 3-story buildings, the windows were knocked out, pigeons were flying through, dead pigeons a foot high. It was the worst thing. My husband and I nearly fainted when they talked us into it, and then we went to see it. But and that's why I appreciate vision. We did not have it back then. I've learned it now what it is, but I did not know it. We just thought we were crazy. But I will tell you, and that was in the very middle of downtown Salisbury. And since then, we have seen nearly $40 million of private investment from the tax credits, and an increase in our tax base in Salisbury of nearly $100 million. And of course, it's not just historic buildings that it helps. Because if you just begin in an area that's a ghost town, you see new construction as well, which we have seen. But we do have before and after pictures, and we would love to share them with you. Uh-huh.
And I know I'm taking
Okay.
up time with quick, Reagan. It's sort of following on that when you talk about Salisbury had been a ghost town, and now we see, and I know that numbers of dollars are what people are looking for. To somebody who's not in that business, we all drive through wherever we're going in the state, these ghost towns, small towns where there's just nothing left.
Right.
In addition to sort of before and after photographs of building, it's the before and after of the downtown, and the number of businesses that come back, the number of people who start living there, that I think really brings it home to people. And I know that a lot of folks in the legislature who are from these smaller towns where there's nothing.
Right.
There's nothing. How to get them to a place where they could see a tipping point of this even helping them.
Right. And, you know, because a lot, especially with the mills, with textile and furniture and tobacco, and, you know, you employed a lot of people in these very small towns. And a lot of these mills were in these very small towns, and they were really the only employment. And when this is suddenly gone and there are no jobs there, I'm very concerned, especially about these small towns that are turning into ghost towns, because the young people are leaving. And they're not going to come back unless there's something there. There's something exciting there to bring them back. And the momentum really that you see in Raleigh and Winston-Salem and Durham for the tax credits, just we're getting started in the small towns. And they're just, and that's what I continue to hear, they're just beginning to recover from the recession. And we're pulling the rug out from under them when we take this away. Because you've got to have something there to sell your town. You've got to have something, especially to bring young people back if you want to keep that energy. And so I'm very concerned about what will happen in these small towns. And so that was the purpose really of this tour, was if the legislators weren't going to listen to me and my department, they need to hear from people at home that say, you represent me, and this is critical for me. And you know, you need to help your hometown. So that's sort of the purpose of why I'm doing what I'm doing. But you're exactly right. I'm very concerned. And Patrick, is there anything you'd like, I don't know how much time we have left, but would you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, I think you did a wonderful job, and I know these folks didn't come here to listen to me talk about this, but if anybody has any specific questions, I'm happy to hang around for a few minutes afterwards and get into some of the details related to the tax credit program.
How are you contacting the little small towns? Like I was thinking of Elton, my husband,
Uh-huh.
when we went back there. It's so sad to see these little towns dying. So are you in touch with
Yes.
the governing parties
I
in
am.
these small towns to
Well,
rally?
what we have done, our partners are the North Carolina League of Municipalities and the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners and the North Carolina Metropolitan Mayors Coalition, which are the larger cities. But we are working through, and the mayor in Elkin did a beautiful job of writing to legislators to explain this. But we work through them for this tour, and the 42 cities and towns, and we've got 3 small towns that we're headed to actually this week, just this week, in addition. And I will say my tour continues. I'm going to continue on until this passes, which I don't know when that'll be, but I certainly didn't think when I started the 1st of January I would still be doing this here in May. But we are going to very small towns, and we're actually focusing in on those because that's where we think they need the help the worst. So, and I believe Elkin is on our list, isn't it, Carrie? We got Elkin on our list. So I've got a list of about 20 that right now we're scheduled through the end of the month, and we will continue. But that's exactly where we do this. So we hold these in large cities and small, and they're all very different. But as long as we can even just touch base with the mayor and let the local newspaper know. We've worked a lot through the media to get the word out. So, but thank you. You're exactly right. And we're looking forward to going to Elkin.